everybody's computer. So for the folks online, welcome to the California section of the ACS. We're here in Comal restaurant, Mexican restaurant in downtown Berkeley. They're hooking it up. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, there was a question here, but yeah, we're waiting for this sound system in the restaurant to get their microphone active. But I'm just saying hello to the folks that are online. We're about to hear from Arlene Blum and Megan Arnett, and I'm going to make a couple announcements in just a moment. So thank you for being with us.
So, you come out of the hospital and right there in the hospital, there's a pharmacy, and you'll have friends waiting for you and so on.
Okay, everyone, welcome again.
Yeah.
Welcome to this meeting at the California section of the American Chemical Society. We're really glad that you're here. Hope you're having a great time. And of course, the biggest role, the biggest objective, the biggest goal of this meeting is that we get to meet each other, and I get to meet you too, which is great. I'm Alex Madonna. I'm the chair of the California section in 2025. Our chair-elect is sitting over here. That's Chris Postma.
Once in future chair.
If you're on Zoom, you can't see him because he's sitting on the other side of the screen. But you probably know who Jim is, but you'll be hearing from him too. If you want to come up here and say hello, Jim.
I'll be fine. I have my chances.
And we're planning future events working together on this, and we'll keep you informed. So I hope you're following Cal ACS on our email list, and that you check out the Vortex and our website, which is www.calacs.org. It's pretty easy. We're also on Facebook. We are on LinkedIn. We have a group there. We are on Blue Sky. I post there a little more, but I'd be happy to see you in any of those venues. And the other important thing I have to talk about was two things. One thing is that tomorrow, Sunday, we'll be at the Solano Stroll. So if you're in the Berkeley, Albany area, you can't miss that event. It's the biggest party of the year, at least in this part of the world. And we will be there doing some hands-on chemistry with the National Chemistry Week theme, which is the hidden life of spices. So we will be talking about the chemistry of spice, scents, and colors, and it's going to be a lot of fun. One of our colleagues here, Dr. Margareta Sequin, has been advising us. You can't see her again unless she comes up here. If you're on Zoom, that is, but there she is. He's been advising us on the chemistry of spices, and that's what we're going to be presenting tomorrow. But this is a project of ACS, the National ACS, and it's part of this National Chemistry Program, which is a nationwide program. So we'll be doing a few additional events around that theme in the coming months. The first one is tomorrow. But the biggest thing on our calendar, of course, is the Western Regional Meeting. That's at the end of October. There's a poster here with the URL, and I should put it in the chat for the folks online. But we hope that if you haven't already registered for the Western Regional Meeting in San Jose, which we're co-hosting with the Silicon Valley section, that you will, because early bird registration ends on September 25th, and then you'll have to pay more. And it's going to be a really exciting meeting. We have 32 symposia, 550 session to abstracts, multiple exciting, wonderful keynote speakers, including ACS President Dorothy Phillips and ACS CEO Al Horvath. It's going to be a great meeting, and if that isn't good enough for you, we also have a dinner with the session of beer brewing science, featuring the director of the beer brewing program at UC Davis. That's Glenn Fox, and I can tell you, he's a character you want to hear him speak if you like beer, or even if you don't. It'll be fun. So that's actually Sunday evening, October 26th. But the meeting runs from Saturday the 25th through Tuesday morning, the 28th. Saturday is primarily undergraduate presentations, and there's a whole series of workshops, both for students and other professionals. A lot of opportunities for professional development here and for getting started if you're a student. So we look forward to seeing all of you there. Again, don't forget, early registration ends September 25th, and you can scan the QR code on the poster out front if you haven't already looked at the website for the Western Regional Meeting. I'll put that in the Zoom chat. All right, I should stop talking, but I just need to welcome our speakers. We are here today to hear from Dr. Arlene Blum and Dr. Megan Arnett. And Arlene has presented to this section multiple times over the past 20 years, actually, about her work on persistent organic pollutants and these compounds, especially organic halogens, but other types of materials that are found in consumer products and probably shouldn't be there. So she will tell you more. And Megan Arnett, who did her PhD, I believe, in the Ron Cohn group here at UC Berkeley, has become the director of the Berkeley Center for Green Chemistry, where they figure out how to make products that won't cause these kinds of environmental problems down the road, and in fact are sustainable. So we'll be hearing from her about how that works. But I can tell you that it's a great it's an amazing program, and the students work on real world problems, and the results are very exciting. So I don't think I can say any more. And the microphone for Arlene. So welcome, Arlene.
When we turn the lights out in this room, you can't see the screen.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, it is all bright.
I'm sorry, the mic is only here, so I was gonna stand there, but I don't think I can project enough, so you should look at the screen once you turn the lights.
Yeah, that's it.
But yeah,
Yeah, we got sunshine.
The sun is
We have
strong.
sunshine.
Heavier.
All right, well,
oh, I was kind of later, we're gonna be. Put it in gravel.
well,
It's becoming dark, huh?
yeah, the contrast is okay. It's not great.
Next slide and see, yeah, yeah.
Now, how does-
So we're working on the question of lighting here.
Never mind. Well, I'm just tell you a little of my story. It started in Berkeley. This is Berkeley in the 70s. That looks familiar. And actually I came to Berkeley in the 60s, and I needed to pick my PhD advisor. And I chose Nacho Chinoco, if anybody remembers him, because that's our group rock climbing in Yosemite. Nacho's can't quite see, he's wearing a blue helmet climbing road. And then I had come from MIT, where I was the only woman. They'd never given a woman a doctorate in physical chemistry. There were like 4 women. I was in classes with 5, it was unusual. So I came to Berkeley, and these are other women chemists. So you can see that in this picture. And this is while I was in grad school, I climbed Mount Waddington, which is the highest mountain in British Columbia. You can't see it. My flag says tRNA, which is what I was working on at Berkeley. So when I finished Berkeley, I went to postdoc at Stanford, and a friend of mine who was an early environmentalist died in a climbing accident, and I wanted to do something for the environment in his memory. And so I went to see Bruce Ames, if people know who Bruce Ames was. Yes. Oh, Bruce, yeah. So Bruce had a rapid screening test for whether chemicals caused mutations and bacteria, and if they did, they were likely to cause cancer. It was one of the first screening tests. And so I went to see him about what I could do for the environment. And he said, I'm really worried about the flame retardant children's pajamas. I think it's a mutagen and a carcinogen, and all the kids in America are wearing pajamas with 5% by weight. This chemical called tris, the short name. And so we did an experiment. We found little girls who'd never worn tris-treated pajamas, Because her mom got her pajamas in the UK and we put her in the tris pajamas and collected her urine. And the first morning, there were known cancer-causing small halogenated chemicals in her urine. And every day she wore the pajamas, the level went up. And she stopped wearing the pajamas and the level went back down again. And we said, oh my goodness, these chemicals are getting into this child. Because chemicals like food, drugs, pesticides are regulated, but all these other chemicals like in pajamas were not regulated. So then we ran a mutagenicity screen and it was one of the strongest mutagens we'd seen, it's tris. So we thought, oh my goodness, we have to tell the parents, write a paper and tell the parents of America. But then I got invited to this mountain. Do you know what mountain this is? Anybody know? Mount Everest. It was Everest, and I was the first American woman ever to get a chance to climb Mount Everest. So I had this terrible dilemma. Did I stay and tell the parents of America about the cancer-causing chemicals in their kids' pajamas, or did I go climb Mount Everest? So how many of you would have stayed and talked about the cancer-causing chemicals? Raise your hand. And how many of you would have gone climbing Mount Everest? So I did both. And so while I was climbing on the beautiful slopes of Everest, you can't see how beautiful the picture, but it's a steep ice wall, carrying loads. Every night I got to my tent and I worked on my paper. And this is my high point. Again, you can't see, but I'm at 24,500 feet and I have a flag. The one on the left is a petri dish without tris, not so many mutations. And the one on the right, blowing the wind, had tris, more mutations. And so then I sent my paper by mail runner from Everest to Kathmandu, and it was published as a lead article in Science. And the subtitle of this paper is really the basis of what we do now. The main flame retardant in children's pajamas is a mutagen that should not be used. And so what do most scientific papers, all scientific papers recommend at the end to do next? More study. And they don't usually do a couple experiments and say, stop using this chemical in kids' pajamas. And so and I will say that right when we wrote this, Bruce Ames was a master at such things. The next week, we were talking about this on the Good Morning America, the Today Show, all 3 TV networks. And there was a unified press. So within days of our paper coming out, every parent in America knew that their children's pajamas contained a cancer-causing chemical that ended up in the child. And what happened, which is what should happen, is 3 months later, our paper came out in January of 77, April 77. Tris-treated garments were banned by the Consumer Product Safety Commission. And that says something when everyone in America gets the same news and believes the same things. Very powerful. So brominated tris was banned. And I remember, it's funny, about a few months later, I rode my bike down to Penny's, which used to be about a block from here. And I bought about 35 pairs of pajamas in all different sizes to see if there still was tris in the pajamas. And the sales lady beamed at me, said, you have such a large family, dear. And I felt like a super spy. And I took little bits from the seams of the pajamas so I could give them to people for gifts. But then I did NMR and looked what was in them. And about a third still had brominated tris because they hadn't gotten out of the stores yet. The other 2/3 had chlorinated tris, which was virtually identical in structure and function. And we didn't yet know about the toxicity, but it was a big worry. And then we ran Ames tests on it, and it also was a mutagen, likely carcinogen, and it was removed from use in pajamas way back then. However, it continued to be used in foam, in furniture, and cars, and children's products, which I did not know. And this is a bit of a through thread of my talk, chlorinated tris. So, well, actually, I will, well, no. So meanwhile, I led the first American ascent of a mountain called Annapurna One. That book I wrote called Annapurna, A Woman's Place. And it's considered the most dangerous and hardest to climb of any of the world's highest mountains. And our expedition was actually all women, the first Americans to climb it. And I like to say that what we're doing now, removing harmful chemicals from everyday products, is really similar to climbing Annapurna. Because you get a vision of the summit, you get a team of people who share your vision, you have to raise money, which is always hard work, get your supplies, pack up heavy loads, and plot up the mountain. And everything we're doing, we really have to plot up the mountain, it's hard work. And there'll be a storm, an avalanche, a Yeti will pop out, you just have to be climbing the mountain. So that's my first book, Annapurna. I did bring my books, if anybody wants one afterwards, I'm happy to sign them. And my other book, Breaking Trail, I wrote Annapurna in a year, and then well, I'll just say in 1980, it was very much like now. The president, Megan, closed, took the solar panels off the White House, great EPA scientists lost their jobs. It was really terrible. And so I decided I would just go spend a year walking across the Himalayas and then go back to science. I write about this in Breaking Trails, about 10 different adventures and their connection to my childhood. But I will say that I didn't come back to science until 2006. And the reason I got back to science so easily is the same chlorinated tris that had been kids' pajamas was in the nation's furniture. 5% of the weight of the phone was chlorinated tris. So I ended up founding the Green Science Policy Institute. We're scientists who pick issues where we can have an impact on healthier products and public health. We write papers in good journals, and our papers have tens of thousands of downloads. Particularly environmental science and technology letters. Some of our papers, and among the 6 most read papers in all time were our papers, and not because they're necessarily the best, but because they're important questions. And we have a good communication strategy, which if you go to our website and look up communications, it's there in detail for anyone who would like their papers to have more impact. Then we publicize our papers and we bring people together in retreats, people from government, business, academia, and the nonprofit world. So one of the big problems with the chemicals are, remember, brominated tris was banned, we got chlorinated tris. This is another flame retardant. On the left, you have decabromo ether, 2 phenyl rings all surrounded with bromines with an ether bond. That's used in television cases in plastic. It's up to 15 or 20% of the weight of the plastic in electronics cases. And it was finally phased out, one on the left, because it's persistent, bioaccumulative, and toxic. And what's the replacement? The one on the right. It looks almost identical. It's the decabromoethane bond instead of an ether bond, but similarly toxic, similarly persistent, bioaccumulative, and it turns out to be equally toxic. So as the sales of the ether went down, the sales of the ethane went up. And for those of you who remember, there's a big deal about throwing away your black plastic spatula. Everybody heard about that? Well, that's not the answer. What's in the plastic spatula was the ether, and now it's the ethane. And the answer is not to put these chemicals in your plastic, because then it enters the global recycling chain and it's in your spatula and your soup spoon and your lunchbox. So, but what do you do about this problem of always substituting something similar, because it's so expensive for industry to change their processes, that if the chemical producers say, here's something that's almost identical in structure and function, and we don't know about toxicity, but we think it's fine. Do you think it's fine? But that's the general substitute. So there, as we all know, there are tens of thousands of chemicals, and to evaluate one chemical for toxicity takes years of research and then years of advocacy. And you finally phase out one, like the brominated tris or the decaether, and what do you get? The chlorinated tris or the decaethane. And so what do you do about this? So we came up with the idea of sorting these chemicals into 6 families or classes that have similar structure, function, and toxicity. And so we have a website called 6classes.org, and there are postcards on my table that have the website and pictures of the 6 classes. And for each class, show what they are. So the classes are PFAS, antimicrobials, flame retardants, the halogenated ones. And those are the ones that our institute has works on and has actually had remarkable successes in reducing their use, which make everybody's home and the environment healthier. Also bisphenols and phthalates, solvents, and certain metals. And these are also the things that make so much plastic so harmful, because these are all found in plastics. So if you go to 6classes.org, there's a 4-minute video on each that says why they're harmful, where they're used, and what you can do to reduce your exposure. So in half an hour, there's an intro. So you can 7 4-minute videos, half an hour, you can learn a lot about reducing exposure to harmful chemicals. So I'm going to talk, as I said, about the organohalogens, my favorites, because they're both in many cases useful, and they're very, in many cases, quite harmful. And we're going to talk particularly about fluorine, as in PFAS, chlorine, as in antimicrobials, and bromine, as in flame retardants. And one of the interesting things about organohalogens, which I wrote in my 1977 science paper, and I don't know if people are aware of, they're not naturally occurring in any mammalian system. So there's things called efflux transporters that keep toxics out of our cells. But since organohalogens are not really known to our cells, they don't see them. They're invisible and they just go into our cells. And there are other efflux transporters that transport the toxics out of our cells, and they don't know them either. So they go into our cells and they stay. And this is a paper in the S&T, and I can't read it. Can anybody up there read? It was a great quote. Can somebody read it or not really?
Oh, so cells are like nightclubs. They have to make sure that bad individuals, those who might disrupt the club, stay out. To that end, both nightclubs and cells employ bouncers to prevent unwanted characters from entering. For nightclubs, the undesirable characters to be drugged. For cells, the undesirable characters are noxious chemicals.
And organohalogens.
And organic.
Well, they're the organohalogens. So I just love this because this is an S&T, and it's a way of making it real to people. And so these organohalogens go into our cells. There are no bouncers who can see them, and they stay, and they invariably cause trouble. So I'm going to start by talking about PFAS, which I'm sure you've all heard about. And the pictures are of the long chain PFASs, where you have 8 carbons surrounded by fluorine. And again, PFAS are very useful. They're good as stain and water repellents. They're slippery, but they never break down in the environment. And all the ones that have been studied are harmful. So it's a big decision to use a chemical that will never break down, where all the ones that have been studied have been harmful. We can't say they're all harmful, but they're very likely to be. And the way you deal with PFAS is you think about the whole class. And it's been 10 years since we really introduced the class concept, and it has turned out to be so useful for PFAS. We thought of the class concept as being good for purchasers, architects and designers, builders. They really like it if they want to make healthy buildings or products, and they're not. It's a way to get an overview of chemicals that they might want to avoid. But we've been really surprised that governments are particularly for PFAS, talking about the whole class. So I first, you can't see that nice picture. That's me trekking in the Himalayas, reading a book called Stain Resistant, Nonstick, Waterproof, and Lethal. The story of C8 in 2013. And I was horrified to learn all about PFAS, and I happened to be trekking with a Swedish analytic chemist who lived at my house when she was postdocing at the Department of Toxic Substances. And every time I read something in the book, she'd say, oh yeah, it's worse than that. So I came back and I Googled PFAS, and it was, they were PFCs then. That was before DuPont came up with the name PFAS. Made it be further confusing, I don't know, the alphabet soup. But anyway, they were called PFCs. I Googled, and the only people who knew about them were scientists. And they were worried, but nobody knew what to do. The scientists knew they were harmful. So I asked my Swedish friend, who are the best PFC scientists in the world? She gave me about 30 names. I wrote them all and said, should we have a call to talk about what to do about this? And to my amazement, they all said yes. And we started having these calls in 2013. We've had a call the first Wednesday of the month, every Wednesday since 2013. And in the course of it, the scientists on this wrote many, many papers. We wrote a statement in 2015 calling for stopping the use of PFAS and using safer alternatives. Because PFAS really are multi-system toxicants. They have many mechanisms of action, but they're endocrine disruptors and they cause cancer. They're harmful, different ones, do different things, but all the ones that have been studied are harmful. If you haven't seen it, there's a great movie called Dark Waters, which is the story of an attorney who we work with, who uncovered the PFAS problem and got a big settlement and used it to do epidemiology on tens of thousands of people and found the human health effects, which started a lot of things. Oh yeah, so this is a statement we wrote in May 2015. It was published in Environmental Health Perspectives, calling on the international community to really stop the use of PFAS and find safer alternatives. And one of our first papers, we looked to see what were the sources of contaminated drinking water from PFAS. And it turned out, not surprisingly, to be military bases, airports, production facilities, wastewater treatment plants. It's not their fault. They're gathering the PFAS from upstream. And just when we were about to publish our paper, the EPA defined a health advisory level for 80 parts per trillion for PFAS, and we could calculate 6 million people had contaminated drinking water. And this is a paper again, which continues to be, I think it's had 80,000 downloads, and it continues to be read. But we had maybe a dozen papers with the scientists in this, you know, now we have 200 scientists on the call. So PFAS are problematic, very expensive to clean up. Water filtration works reasonably well with GAC filters for the C8s, but the replacement for the C8s are the C6s, which go right through those filters and require reverse osmosis, which is really expensive. So prevention is preferable. And so a couple quick optimistic stories. We wrote a paper looking at PFAS in fast food packaging. About half the fast food packaging had PFAS. We did a lot of press. Senator Blumenthal wrote the CEOs of all the fast food companies and said, why do you have PFAS in your fast food? And they never answered. But we later heard from McDonald's that as soon as they knew about our paper, and they got the letter from Senator Blumenthal, we had a one-day meeting for the industry here at the David Brower Center here in Berkeley. And as soon as that all happened, McDonald's said they started looking for safer substitutes. And it took them 3 years, but all the McDonald's in the world stopped using PFAS about 3 years after our paper came out. Well, this just lists all the different legislation. Like the country of Denmark did it in 2 years, and then way back in 2024, you can't read it, but the US EPA FDA banned PFAS in food packaging. So that all started with our paper, and that's kind of our model. I'm going to give you 2 more of my favorite examples, and then we're going to hear about safer alternatives. So we found that the EPA did a study, and the major source of exposure to PFAS for children was carpeting, because people sprayed PFAS on their carpets, so they're stain and water resistant. And so we decided to try to get the carpet industry, and they're all in Dalton, Georgia, to get them to come from Dalton, Georgia to Berkeley, and that's challenging. But we have a buyers club, which are all these companies who come together in their purchasing to require transparency and use their purchasing power for safer products. And they all had PFAS-free carpets. But the carpets at Home Depot and Lowe's that went into people's homes and daycares all had PFAS. So we wrote the letters, but we got, Harvard and Genentech and Google to send the letters to the carpet companies. And they all came from Dalton, Georgia, to the David Brower Center here in Berkeley. And we had a very nice dinner with lots of wine where everyone became friends. And then the next day, we started a one-day meeting with the carpet people saying, well, we went from the C8 to the C6, and we've solved the problem. Go away, why are you bothering us? And then we had some great EPA scientists, a bunch of scientists saying, well, actually, the C6 are just as harmful, and there are many more C6 than C8, and they're harder to remove, and you haven't solved the problem. And then we had their customers saying, well, these people, the buyers club, were there saying, we don't want PFAS in our carpets, why should people who go to Home Depot and Lowe's have to have them? And then we had Michael Kabori, the vice president of sustainability from Levi's, came in his very cute Levi's suit with no PFAS. And he said, see, no PFAS, and we're more successful than ever. And the carpet people went, what? No PFAS? And you're still successful? How can that be? And he said, well, we told them they needed PFAS, now we're telling them they don't. So by the end of the day, we have commitments. And by the end of the day, the whole carpet industry commit to getting out of PFAS. And it happened in one day in 2018. And we knew they had when 2 years later, Home Depot and Lowe's advertised that they were no longer selling any carpets with PFAS. So that was an amazing day. I had not expected that to happen. And we do have a meeting I'll mention later on October 8th at the David Brower Center. We were hoping for a similar result around antimicrobials, but that's another story. Okay, my last one is cosmetics. We looked at, again, 500 cosmetics, half had PFAS, particularly things like waterproof mascara, shiny foundation, and lip gloss. But the other half didn't, so that means the PFAS was essential. And of course, cosmetics really can end up in your body. And the day our paper went online, we had in the House and the Senate introduced the no PFAS in cosmetic bills, nonpartisan, bipartisan. We actually got Republicans and Democrats in the House and Senate to support the No PFAS in Cosmetics Act, which went nowhere, contrary to my expectations. But then the next year in California, we banned PFAS from being used in personal care products, and they're no longer used. So I have more examples, but that's where you go from the paper to communication to policy change. So if anyone loves PFAS, I think it's so interesting. We have a website called PFAS Central. I have postcards that list PFAS Central if you want to remember. And we change it every week with the most recent news articles, scientific papers, translated into one understandable sentence, meetings, jobs, everything PFAS. And the most popular part, is our PFAS-free page, where communities who have been drinking PFAS water for decades and have a lot of health problems said, it's bad enough that we've had PFAS in our water, we want to buy PFAS-free products. Can you give us lists? So we have lists of PFAS-free products. And I'm hoping soon we won't need this web page because so many of these, like textiles now, it's been banned, and starting 2025, textiles can't have PFAS. So we won't need lists anymore soon if products mostly don't have PFAS. Okay, so now we're going to hear about designing safer alternatives for Megan.
And you'll get to clap for Arlene again, because we're gonna just hand them back and forth to each other today. I am Megan Arnett. I'm the executive director of the Berkeley Center for Green Chemistry. I wanted to say thank you, Alex, for that introduction. Alex has come to many of our student presentations and our seminars on campus, and I invite all of you to join those as well. We really appreciate that engagement. You're correct that I did work with Ron Cohen after graduate school. However, I need to out myself in this room. I am a neuroscientist by training. I always joke that in a room of neuroscientists, I'm a chemist, but in a room of chemists, I'm definitely a neuroscientist. So I need to make that, I always like to make that clear right off the bat. But I got really interested in the question of toxics while I was in grad school, because I came across a paper that did a fantastic job of correlating autism incidents to proximity to freeways. And that was really kind of mind-blowing for many of us because, as some of you may know, the blood-brain barrier is a tremendous obstacle. It's a challenge in drug design to get things to cross that in from your blood into your brain is really difficult. But to be able to show that there are environmental factors, like this paper did, there are environmental factors that can do that and cause damage, systemic damage that, you know, has dramatic behavioral consequences for life. It was really, you know, that kind of just blew my mind, and thinking about it in those terms sort of helped. That's how I ended up on this winding path where I'm here today as a neuroscientist looking at green chemistry. The Berkeley Center for Green Chemistry was started by Marty Mulvihill, Meg Schwarzman, and Mike Wilson, as well as a lot of really good friends, about 12 years ago, in recognition of the fact that green chemistry is interdisciplinary. It is not a chemistry problem or, you know, avenue of study alone. It is a public health question. It is a material science and engineering question. It is a chemistry, these are chemistry questions to be answered. So the Berkeley Center for Green Chemistry, while we're housed in chemistry, we are very interdisciplinary on the UC Berkeley campus. I work very closely with public health, material science engineering, all of these disciplines that I've mentioned. And in that work, we take a three-pronged approach. Education, we offer a series of courses, which is what I'm going to be talking about most today. These courses are industry partnered, that are looking for alternatives. That industries come to me looking for alternatives to a chemical, safer, greener alternatives to something that they're currently using in their product or process. So for example, this year we have 5 projects. We're working with WD-40, looking for alternative, safer solvents. We're working with CAL FIRE, looking for alternatives to long-term flame retardants that are dropped from airplanes and helicopters. Those are ammonium phosphate based, but they've been shown to have high levels of heavy metals. We're working with ECOS, ECOS, which you may have seen in your grocery aisles. They're a home care cleaning brand, and we're looking for plastic-free packaging for them. We're working with Apple on alternatives to the epoxies that they use in PCB manufacturing. And one more, USDA looking for alternatives to the materials that are used, the melamine that's used for magic erasers, which as a parent of small children, I am really devastated by the fact that the magic erasers are not what we should be using, because if you're familiar with these, they're really fantastic. It's stain removal, but they are also formaldehyde based and problematic. Anyway, so that is an example of that is our Greener Solutions graduate course. We run several courses. That's our Greener Solutions graduate course, which is run in the fall. Those are examples of the projects that we're doing this year. I'll be talking today about some of our other projects. We also run an internship program where we pay the interns to go and work in industry, government, and nonprofit hosts. And then we also do research, and that research is focused on de-risking some of our most promising ideas that come from these 2 programs, as well as just our own sort of like ideation of what we think it is would be exciting and useful. De-risk those in order to accelerate their market adoption. So now you know a little bit about BCGC, and as I mentioned, I'm going to be talking primarily today about 2 projects that we've done as a part of the Greener Solutions course. Because I think, and my hope is that you will leave today feeling optimistic about the potential for safer alternatives. Because once we have a safer alternative, it really opens up the possibilities in terms of regulation, in terms of market uptake, all these things. And as I'll say many times today, these are chemistry problems with chemistry solutions. We have worked in several projects related to PFAS. As you can see listed here, these are the projects, and then also mentioned here is a partner that worked with us. So as Arlene alluded to the compostable food packaging, we worked on that project with Method. We've worked on removing PFAS from rugs. We've worked on looking at its they're often used in the inner linings of this kind of plastic packaging that you see. And then they are also found in firefighter turnout gear. For today, I'm going to be talking about the one in the bottom left, the PFAS in floor polish. That project was done in 2021 by 3 really fantastic students. I should mention that these projects, they're always interdisciplinary. We make a point of making sure that every project team has a pretty even distribution of material science engineers, chemists, and students who are getting a master's in public health. In this case, this was a smaller team, but they did a really fantastic job finding safer alternatives. And I want to mention that the slides that I'll be showing for the next few slides, these are all modified from their original presentation, which you can find on our website, our Berkeley Center for Green Chemistry website, as well as their final report, which is a really comprehensive look into these alternatives. I'll just be kind of briefly touching base on these. So just to give a little bit of a lens, and Arlene, of course, is the czar of this entire field. So she did a fantastic job setting this up. I'll just briefly mention, why are PFAS in floor polish? So this is these are the most commonly, this is the most commonly used actor here pictured on the right. These are proprietary, but Chemours that makes Capstone FS60 and FS65, this is the anticipated structure of that functional actor. In 2008, it was well established that every single floor polish that you could get contained PFAS. They have been, since then, the industry has been trying to remove them. And in fact, Minnesota has banned them from floor polishes, and other states are working towards that. The main problem here with PFAS is, if Arlene didn't convince you they were a problem, hopefully I can, is really who is being exposed. Where do you polish your floors? I certainly don't do it at home, but I hope that my kid's school does. Hospitals do, grocery stores, all places with particularly vulnerable people. So you have that consumer exposure, but really who we're concerned about is the janitorial staff. A study in 2014 showed that PFAS level in the air when someone is using a floor polish is an order of magnitude higher than it would normally be. So you have janitorial staff who are using these products sometimes 8 to 12 hours a day, or anywhere from 5 to 7 days a week. So that's a really high exposure, and you've seen a very high health burden. So this is let's get rid of these. But the problem is always with these chemicals, nobody is trying to intentionally poison anyone. Why are we using something that's bad? And it's because they're really good at what they do, as is the use case with all PFAS. They're highly effective at what they do. In floor polishes, their technical performance, they're really great wetting agents, which means they help the liquid spread. I probably don't have to say any of this to a room full of chemists, but they're really good leveling agents, recoating formulas that don't have PFAS. You see really a degradation in subsequent layers if you're trying to coat a floor. And low concentration, you don't have to use a lot of PFAS in formula, which makes it really easy to formulate these floor polishes. So they're really good at what they do. The next question is it possible to replace them? And the answer is yes. This group, they recognized 2 different replacement strategies. The first one was rhamnolipids, which are surfactants that are produced in bacteria. And there's a number of advantages here to using rhamnolipids, but first are they, including that they use renewable feedstocks, they're also stable in a wide range of conditions, which is really critical. They're not too pH or temperature sensitive, and they're biodegradable at low toxicity, which is a big difference. And low toxicity, sorry, they're biodegradable and low toxic, not toxic, which is a big difference from PFAS, right? And the good thing about rhamnolipids is that they're already used as surfactants in these industries. So when we're doing when we're running our course, we often encourage the students to look across industry sectors to see what other people are using as replacements, or maybe not even as replacements, just as surfactants. And look to those examples for ideas for how to replace their chemical for their partner. I misplaced my pointer. Doesn't take me 5 seconds to lose something. So this was the first strategy that the students came up with. The second one was looking at amino acids, which again, as everyone in this room probably knows, amino acids are the building block of proteins, and they have this really nice function where they have this variable R group that you can kind of stick different things on in order to get the characteristic that you want from that particular amino acid. So this group was focusing on SLG. And again, this is produced from a renewable feedstock. And it has it works well as a surfactant. It has high surface activity, low toxicity, and really quick biodegradation. Again, in contrast to PFAS. These are already being used. SLG in particular is being used in these commercial applications, in cosmetics and cleaning. So there's a precedent here for replacing PFAS with these. And again, this is just a summary slide of what we know about these chemicals, sort of the advantages and disadvantages. As is always the case, the main con is the cost of scaling, right? Of the discovery and scaling. There are some solvents that are used. Oh, what's happening? Here we go. There are some solvents that are used in production that are at current production that are not great, but they can be replaced with cleaner or greener ones. Feedstocks, as is the case in many cases, could be competitive, with food meat. And then there's also the potential for pathogenicity. The bacteria that currently we use to produce rhamnolipids is known to be pathogenic, but the enzymes that produce it have been isolated and could be, so you could produce rhamnolipids from other non-pathogenic hosts. So that is my first, and I'll give another example, but this is the work that was done by these students demonstrating that there are alternatives to PFAS. Again, these are chemistry problems and they have chemistry solutions. Now, Arlene and I are going to talk about one more category of chemicals, I believe, right?
On to antimicrobials. And I will say, we don't work on PFAS anymore because everybody is. And so we like to get a bit ahead of the curve and encourage people to work on new and different things. And antimicrobials really need work. Particularly since the pandemic, they're being used in so many things, and there's a sense of it. I go to the Berkeley Y to work out for my knees, and everybody's spraying. And it happens that Berkeley Y actually uses hydrogen peroxide, which is not so bad, but we did a study at gyms, and most gyms use things called quaternary ammonium compounds, which are quite harmful, or organohalogens, which are harmful. Spraying them around, and you get the most exposure and the most harm from things that spray. So the picture shows some of the places where they're used. Really, none of the places is there a benefit. And see what this says. Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah, so way back in 2015, we did one of our scientific statements on two chemicals called triclosan and triclocarban that were used as antimicrobials that were quite harmful, did not provide a benefit. 2015, the FDA phased them out along with there's a total of 19 antimicrobials from use in soap and personal care products. But there were 3, the manufacturers said, give us a year and we'll prove that these chemicals are safe and useful. And so those 3 continue to be used, even though the FDA and the Center for Disease Control have in writing said that soap and water, you want to wash your hands with soap and water, that cleans better than antimicrobial soap. And the antimicrobials, if you're going to use them, like in a hospital, you want to scrub for several minutes, but we wash our hands for 20 seconds. So the antimicrobials go out into the wash water and they're highly ecotoxic. So they don't do anything for your hands, but they go out in the wash water and kill all the little creatures in the creeks and come back in women's breast milk. Triclosan, a study found it in virtually all American women's breast milk, which is not where you want something that kills bacteria. And most bacteria are good. You don't really want to kill off bacteria on your hands. You know, you want to wash them away with soap and water. This was just the FDA press release when in 2016, when they banned 19 of 22 antimicrobials, leaving 3 of them, 2-quaternary ammonium and a organohalogen. So we wrote a paper with 22 scientists on state of the knowledge on quaternary ammonium compounds, which are quite harmful in terms of health and more concerningly in terms of antibacterial resistance. So I hadn't even known this, but tens of thousands of people die because of antibacterial resistance, antibiotic resistance. And there's statements that by 2050, that would be more people will die of antibacterial resistance than of cancer. So it's a serious global problem. And these antimicrobials cross over and harm our resistance and we develop antibiotic resistance from them. And they're very harmful to mitochondria. Anyway, they're harmful in many ways, and there's no benefit. So I've been meeting with the FDA saying, why did you make a decision in 2016? You said you're going to wait 1 year, it's 10 years, and there's no decision. But they're not going to make a decision. So this is interesting. This is a picture I took at Safeway down the road, one of my favorite pictures, you can't quite see it. But the top is Dawn dish soap on the top, and on the bottom is Dawn antimicrobial soap, dish soap. They look the same, they're in the same aisle, picked up in Safeway. But if you read the small print on the label of the Dawn antimicrobial soap, it says Dawn chloroxylenol antibacterial hand soap. So chloroxylenol is one of the 3 antibacterials that we think should not be allowed in soap, but it's allowed in hand soap. So they're labeling their dish, right? That looks like dish soap. You can see the picture on the aisle. They're labeling it hand soap. Because if they labeled it dish soap, it would have to be approved by the EPA as a pesticide. And so to avoid having to get EPA approval, they have labeled it in very small print hand soap. If you go to any store and you look at the antibacterial soap, dish soap, it's called hand soap. But chloroxylenol should not be allowed in dish, it's not allowed in dish soap, it shouldn't be allowed in hand soap, obviously. So and I thought this was a great picture. And I passed it on to our colleagues at Consumer Reports to see if they could help get the word out, because Dawn dish soap is a perfectly good product. And why should they make an antimicrobial soap where they have to make a secret of what their ingredient is? Very small thing. Another area where antimicrobials are used, and these are things like silver, nano silver, and silver is odor control. But Nike did a bunch of research and determined they really provide a benefit, and there are safer alternatives that can provide odor control without the need for antimicrobials. So we have legislation, things got too tough in DC. So we have legislation in Sacramento, 8916, the Safer Soap Act. To stop the use of those 3 antimicrobials where there's potential health harm, no benefit. As I said, could increase antimicrobial resistance. So our legislation got through one committee in the spring, and then 10 trade associations were in opposition. They've been told that if it passed, they would have soap in it. The reality is the only soap that contains antimicrobials is dial soap, some soft soap, and a little bit of Dove soap, and the dishwasher and the dishwashing liquid. So we meanwhile are having a meeting at the David Brower Center on October 7th, where unbelievably every company that manufactures cleaning products or soap with these antimicrobials is coming. So that's Procter & Gamble, Colgate, they're all coming to exchange information. And so we're going to hear their science, which is they do, if you put them on your hand, it'll kill the bacteria on your hand. Do you want to kill the bacteria on your hand? I'm not sure. But, and then we have some really great scientists from all over the country who are coming to give them a lot more science on just how harmful they are. For example, they concentrate 100-fold in mitochondria, which are the engines of the cell, and they harm the function of mitochondria. Anyway, we've got lots of information that people won't have. And then we have in the room several regulators from California and Massachusetts who are in the process of regulating quaternary ammonium compounds. And then we have Whole Foods, who does not allow any of these in any products they sell at Whole Foods or in their own cleaning products. And so we're going to try, we're hoping that these companies will see that their products really are harmful. People are thinking of regulating, customers don't let them, and they will stop opposing our legislation so vehemently. So stay tuned. If you join our newsletter, and I encourage everybody, if you go to any of our websites, to sign up for our monthly newsletter, and we'll keep you informed of what's happening. Well, I have sign-up sheets over at the table by my books if you want to sign up, or you can just do it online easily. Okay, so now we're let's get up.
I'm a teacher, I can project. But I don't know if this is, okay, it's okay. Okay, wait, hold on, is it back on there now? There we go, okay. All right, well, we'll take advantage of that, hopefully that's. So we did a project last year with L'Oreal looking for alternatives to quaternary ammonium compounds in hair conditioners. And it's kind of a pivot here, right? Going from their antimicrobial properties to their properties as surfactants. But the reason why we didn't address them in hand soaps is because they are not necessary. It is not a good greener solutions project or really, thought exercise to try to replace something that isn't required in a product. And as Arlene just demonstrated, these are not needed in hand soaps. So despite the fact that this is a really interesting issue in public policy, and we're very much, BCGC and myself are very much in favor of getting rid of them in hand soaps, we decided to focus on their role in hair conditioners, because in that situation, in that context, they are much more difficult to replace. They do serve a functional purpose that improves the technical performance of the product. So this is the awesome team that worked on this project last year, and the slides that I'll present from here on, in the next couple of slides, are modified from their final presentation and final report, which again, you can see those if you go on our website. Just a real quick, interesting little aside about your hair conditioner. Hair hair conditioner, quats make up about 3% of, oh, thank you, sorry, of AI, but that's just a thing. Quats make up about 3% of your hair conditioner, and the most commonly used ones are VTAC and CTAC listed here. But despite only being about 3%, they really provide a lot of the functional performance that quats and the fatty alcohols really give you the performance of your hair conditioner that you're used to. That performance is based on the fact that, oh, I didn't realize this still had animation, sorry about that. Your hair naturally has this hydrophobic layer of fatty acids here. So on the left of this figure, you see this is undamaged hair. You all didn't expect that you were going to get a lesson in hair conditioners today, but this is my life. For every day, I'm learning about some new functional chemistry. So this hydrophobic layer is really protective of your hair. However, it is stripped during coloring, bleaching, and even some of the more abrasive shampoos strip away that layer. Your hair then absorbs, and then these ester bonds that are exposed kind of decompose. And then your hair becomes less hydrophobic, absorbs moisture from the air. You get more tangling and more surface friction as a result. When you add in these surfactants, these quats, they basically just plug that hole, right? They substitute in their own fatty acid chains, and you get this shiny, smooth hair because of the orientation of those fatty acid chains. You get a really nice, smooth hair. And in fact, I learned as part of this project that there are metrics for this. They actually, L'Oreal, they will sit there with a wig and brush hair and comb hair. They have comb tests to measure the surface friction, the amount of hair lost, all of these things. So this is something they really care about. And it is very difficult to replace this functionality in hair conditioners. Our group last year looked at, they took 3 replacement strategies. So they were looking at cationic surfactants, non-ionic surfactants, and biopolymers. And I'll say here that this group, they did a really fantastic job. One of the funny things about teaching this class is that we don't really we kind of plant seeds of where we want the project to go, but the students really are self-directed. So some of this, even when I was making these slides, I was debating adding in my own slides because we, BCGC decided to take some of this work and put it into our own research hub because we think that there are some promising strategies that aren't really going to be mentioned here very much, but I'm happy to talk about them in another context or, after the talk. Anyway, so I'm just going to briefly show you these. Oh, that table is hard to read. But these are the strategies that they took, as I said, looking at these cationic and non-ionic surfactants and biopolymers. And this table is a summary of about probably 12 to 15 other tables that are in their final report that you're welcome to see. I just wanted to kind of give you a glimpse of how they all added up. And there is some nuance lost here. So the cationic surfactants, the BIE and BBE, BIE doesn't perform quite as well as quats. It's not good enough, but it does perform better than many of the other alternatives, and that is because it was intentionally designed by Innolex. These are Innolex chemicals in order to replace quats. So you would hope that it had very similar technical performance, but it's honestly, it hasn't been good enough to have a lot of market uptake at this point. The other problem is BBE still has pretty high aquatic toxicity, which is a problem with quats. BBE is really is highly toxic to brine shrimp and a few other aquatic organisms, which makes them not a great alternative. You can see the non-ionic alternatives. Those are very experimental. And from the literature that this team gathered, there wasn't a lot of hope for them in their current state as replacements. Their technical performance isn't great, but you can see they do have a much higher, a much better performance in terms of hazard. And finally, the silk proteins and chitosan, and this is where I will say that this project is really interesting to me and my partners in the research side of things, because we think that there could be some really interesting potential of chitosan-based APGs to replace quarks, because chitosan is polarized, and it could potentially function in the right, with a little bit of magical chemistry as to replace quarks as an APG. So all to say, I wanted to keep this as the students presented it, because I do think it's a good example too of how this work can lead to innovation. I have a lot of examples of that from our industry partners taking up what we've done. This is one of the examples of us taking it and kind of moving it along. And I'm happy to talk more about this in another, again, like I said, another time. But I just wanted to end, this is the end of my part of the talk, and depending on time, Arlene, I think, has other things she can say. But I think the message here, especially in this room, that I hope resonates is that, yes, these are chemistry problems, but we need chemists to solve them, right? So and there are solutions that are available. This is work done by students that is rhamnolipids are now the leading replacement for PFASs in these floor polish. Floor polishes in Minnesota, and that is because, I'm not going to claim that is because of our students, but our students really helped guide that work. So that's the end of my part of this. Do you want to?
Let's just ask if people have another, 5 or 6 minutes, I'll tell you about my favorite flame retardants and the 2 of the projects we're doing now. And okay, well, 4 minutes. We weren't sure. Anyway, thank you, Megan. That's so fantastic. Students are learning so much. I think it's so inspirational for students to hear about that. So flame retardants, do they save lives or cause harm? Back in the 1970s, there were lots of fires, and people just thought, lots of fires, let's put flame retardants in everything. And they didn't actually check, did they solve the problem? And often they don't do any good. And are they harmful? And unfortunately, they're very harmful in many cases. So you can't quite see this, but this is a California regulation, Technical Bulletin 117, and it required furniture foam to withstand a candle flame for 12 seconds. That's a very small fire for a short amount of time. And to do that, the foam inside all of our furniture and our cars foam was 5% by weight, a harmful flame retardant. And 12 seconds isn't much, because if you drop a candle on your couch, the fabric burns first, you have a large flame, and the flame retardants don't do any good. So the chemical that was used, I put in chemical slides for chemists, is the second structure down, pentabromine diphenyl ether. And so it's penta, two rings of 5 brominated. And it's halfway in structure between the top structure, which are polybrominated biphenyl, carcinogen neurotoxin, the ones on the bottom, dioxins and furans, carcinogen neurotoxin. So does that second structure look like something that you want to have pounds of in your house that comes out and ends up in you? So that was the situation from our furniture. The chemicals have ended up in all of us, the pentabrominated diphenyl ethers. And so they end up going from products to people. And again, we can't see too well, but they cause serious harm. And indeed, the penta that was used in our furniture and our cars, starting in the 70s, for at least 30 years, the average American child has lost 4 to 5 IQ points. That's very serious. That means our whole population shifts to fewer really smart people and more people who need help. It's been calculated a $266 billion productivity loss every year, a year from the penta that's still hanging around. And worse yet, a study found these chemicals are in everybody because they were in all our cars and our furniture, that people with higher levels are 4 times as likely to die of cancer across our whole population. So that means they're neurotoxins, they're endocrine disruptors, and they never provided a fire safety benefit. So it just shows 2 couches, no difference whether they have the flame retardants or not. we had legislation that always failed. This was when I first started what I'm doing now, and I was working for free. And the chemical industry spent the flame retardant industry spent the documented $21 million in Sacramento, preventing our legislation from passing, which was not pretty. Fans of the Chicago Tribune did this great series of cover stories that won every possible award, and this is the first called Playing with Fire, and the sentence there at the beginning. Deceptive campaign by industry brought toxic flame retardants into our homes and into our bodies, and the chemicals didn't even work as promised. And after that came out, Jerry Brown was governor. He said no more flame retardants in furniture, and so all our furniture now does not have flame retardants. And there's a label saying that it doesn't. If you buy furniture, it'll be there. So our two projects that we're working on, and we're always looking for help if this interests anybody. The same chemicals are still in our cars. We did a study of 101 American cars from 22 brands, i.e. all brands of cars, and they all had, believe it or not, kinds of chlorinated tris. Half of them had the same chlorinated tris that was in the baby pajamas in the 70s, which is well known to be a carcinogen and a neurotoxin. There were three kinds of tris, and they were in pretty much all the cars. So we have partnered with Consumer Reports, who really cares about cars and healthy cars, and the International Association of Firefighters to try to change this 1970 standard with no proven benefit, no data to show there's a benefit that leads to flame retardants in all of our cars. So that's one of our very hard projects right now, because it has to happen through a federal agency, and we are working to get support in the House and Senate for this. And the other problem goes for lithium-ion batteries. However, in most of the standards require flame retardants, the plastic around the batteries. Well, if you remember, to make your TV case resist an open flame for a few seconds, it's got to be 25% by weight of flame retardant. Just a lithium-ion battery fire, flame retardants are never going to do anything but make the fire smokier and more toxic. Unfortunately, Underwriters Laboratory makes a lot of money doing fire testing, and they want to include fire testing in all their standards. So we have a research project at Sandia National Labs where they're comparing burning lithium-ion batteries in cases with and without flame retardants. And so far, there's no difference in the fire behavior, but the flame retardants make the fire smokier. So we're going to write a peer-reviewed paper. We're hoping to follow our model of going from the paper to trying to affect change. But this is really hard, you know. Anyway, so we're trying. And then our third project is the antimicrobials. So all these are very challenging, but if you don't try, you don't succeed. So I'll just say something about our communications strategy. That is very successful. You can't quite see it, but our papers have tens of thousands of downloads and are among the most read in environmental science and technology and ES&T. And really the strategy is to set a good publication date, write a press release, communicate with the press. And it's all detailed on our website. If anyone writes scientific papers and want them to get more readers and like that. So if you want to learn more, go to greensciencepolicy.org or PFAScentral.org or sixclasses.org or arleneblum.com, or maybe if you take a picture of that, that gives you a chance. Maybe someone can tell me, if you take a picture of that, does that work to get to sign up for a mailing list? That's very exciting, but it works. Thank you. So I hope you'll all sign up and we'll be in touch once a month. And so I think if we can reduce the use of these 6 classes and find safer alternatives, we can have a healthier world. And I feel incredibly privileged to get to do the work I do. And this, I'll just end by saying it is reminiscent of climbing the high mountain. You have a really important summit, a great team. You can all join the team. We feel like our team is all the scientists and government people and business people and NGO. Everybody who wants a healthier world is on the team. And we know what the goal is. So I hope we'll stay in touch. Thank you. I don't know if anyone has questions or if you want to go. There's one question, yes. So, why just? Sorry, we don't know that. Yeah, sorry, but, oh, on the slide, I just, that was on my slide, because it was an epi study of women. So it doesn't mean it's just women. I think that was from my slide. Yeah, I think it was just a study of women. Oh. So they haven't studied women. That's very certain on the slide, but yeah. Yes.
So you went from the topic of antimicrobial really short chain coronary compounds, and then to air conditioners is considered longer. What about the longest one, which I think is in our softener for clothing? Is there a concern for that too, or if you haven't looked at it, or?
I mean, this is getting at the point of quats are such a huge class of chemicals, right? And some of them are great, like acetylcholine is a quat, and that is a neurotransmitter. Right? We need these. I don't know about the longer chain ones. When it comes to the ones that I was talking about, I don't think that the ones that are in conditioners, as far as I know, there isn't the same degree of evidence of like mitochondrial disruption and that kind of those studies. It is much more based on the aquatic toxicity. So again, this is sort of we're building out this literature. Right.
I don't, but it is very complex. So the ones that are used in hand soap are all problematic. And they're just best avoided, I think, if you don't know them. I think it's changing the burden of proof. Right now, we assume all chemicals are great until we do a huge amount of research to show they're harmful. So we're not saying all the 6 classes are necessarily harmful, but if they're in those classes, let's have some research before we just go ahead and put them in our products in our bodies. Yes.
So there's another chemical, formaldehyde, that is used by almost every industry, whether it's in cosmetics, whether it's in household products, textile, and recently we're using it as a reducing agent to create wrinkle-free clothes. That is something, there are alternatives. Would that be something you would be looking at or have you considered?
In terms of formaldehyde alternatives, so actually our magic eraser project is looking for alternatives to this formaldehyde mending, or they use formaldehyde to make the magic eraser. There's legislation right now in California, I think, that is banning any formaldehyde. Well, no, the toxic stuff, but also something pending that is trying to ban. I might be wrong, but okay, yeah, any formaldehyde initiative, like emitting products, narcotics, but yeah.
It's for the skin products as well. And if you are interested, I do have alternatives.
Oh, yeah, I would love to hear about it. I mean, yeah.
I will share a little bit about how the reports is about. I used to work at Trader Joe's, and during COVID, we had an ethanol shortage, so we changed all our cleaner to quats. And someone asked me, because I would work at college chemistry, is this harmful? And I look at this quaternary structure, definitely bad for your health. So, but none of us were instructed to wear gloves or wear masks. And also, we were to clean the floor with it, the walls, everything, while all the products were being marinated overnight. We're still saying it's on product packaging because we sprayed and wipe it. And I don't think they ever went back to ethanol-based cleaner because it's cheaper, I think. So I was wondering how, I'm guessing it's penetrated to skins and like organic products. Saying even if you are buying organic products from stores and Safeway and all, they spread all this clean product overnight,
I want to say something about organic products. They help the farm workers mostly. So the farm workers are who are really exposed, like fumigants. By the time we get products, they probably only have traces or almost, it's not that big difference for us, but it's life and death for the farm workers. So it's a good thing for the health and the bees and the pollinators and the environment, the ecosystem. So organic is really good for the world. But I think that's a good project to educate that you want to go away from plots. And I will say, we're collecting unbelievably crazy ads advertising the need for antimicrobials. What is it we saw? An ad for miracle sheets, and that's nanosilk sheets. What's nanosilk? And they're supposed to cure baldness, hair problems, complexion, allergies, and of course your personal life. So, so anyway, we're collecting for last week tonight. We're going to send them all to John Oliver because he did his show on PFAS, and I was the advisor, so I know the producers. And I would love to have something on antimicrobials because humor is a good way. No, I say I go to the Berkeley Y and everybody's conscientiously spraying all this stuff that you don't need.
I would add to that too, that, my understanding is that some of the very early work in understanding that clots were disruptive was actually in a lab, a lab doing animal research. The researchers noticed that all of a sudden they were having fertility issues with their mice. And they traced it back to the fact that the cleaning agents had been switched to a cleaning agent that had clots, and they were able to demonstrate that change had caused reproductive issues in the mouse population. So it wasn't even part of their research, but they identified that as the problem. And as we all know, if it shows up like that in mice, we definitely want to look for it, look for alternatives. And so I just think that's an interesting anecdote about this.
Yeah, I'll just mention the first time I became aware of clots as a potential health problem, aside from the fact that they don't smell good, is at the beginning of the pandemic, they were being used to decontaminate facilities, but there are some facilities you don't get to leave, right? They're called prisons and immigration detention, and these people were being dosed with clots, and it was having obvious health effects, and they were complaining. I don't know if there was really a remedy there, but this problem hasn't gone away.
Well, they spray at school, starting the pandemic, and people need to stop. So anyway, we usually try to just work with decision makers because we're so small, but for this, we would really welcome trying to change how America thinks about antimicrobials. And we are happy that Berkeley Environmental Law Center students are working with us, and we're hoping they'll help.
First of all, thank you for this, both of you, for this amazing discussion today. And also, there are so many inspirational stories throughout.
Use the mic because that way it'll go to the Zoom crowd.
Oh, they're picking it up. That's right. But we want to hear too.
So again, first of all, very much thank you for for this brilliant talk, disclosing a lot of the problems that we are facing every day. And I got multiple inspirational stories from both of your talk. I want to my question is a little bit on the trajectory, I would think, or potential. How about what are you what are your personal experiences when you are talking to these corporates, especially asking them to switch to more safer alternatives, which are typically not super cheap. And then most of these corporates, their major factor is economic drivers. When it comes to health, they're more you can work with policymakers. But what about when it comes to environment? No one cares in general. But if it is an order of magnitude of economic. So what are your experiences or insights or suggestions for people?
I'll start, and then you could go next. So our strategy is to find champions within the industry who really care about health and environment. And one or two champions can make all the difference. When we did our work on furniture, I met the executive director of the polyurethane foam industry who came from the South and was not of my political party. But when he learned how harmful chemicals were, he immediately became so activated that all the producers, the chemical producers of the harmful chemicals were members of this association that provided much of his funding. And they actually all quit his association because he became impassioned. So I think finding champions who really care, and they are, everybody's people. And indeed, by having our meeting at the Brower Center, getting all those companies to come, our hope is to find some champions who say our chemicals are harmful. And I don't think replacements need to be more costly. When things change, particularly if there's a level playing field, everyone changes, then it's fine. So I don't know if that's your experience.
Absolutely, and I'm lucky that I mostly work with those companies. They're coming to me because they're looking for alternatives. But on the other side, I will add, in addition to having really like change maker companies, you need regulation, right? But like companies will respond to regulation. And I know that there are clear examples of regulation getting in the way of innovation. However, it doesn't mean that all regulation is bad, right? We having a robust regulatory environment can inspire innovation, and I can give lots of examples of that. But I would just give a plug for, having both sides. We need change makers in the industry who are interested in doing good things, and we also need smart regulation that kind of inspires the whole field to move in a safer direction.
I just want to add that we try to persuade companies to move ahead of regulation. And the carpet industry did. The outdoor industry, I tried for 10 years to tell them they should stop using PFAS. And I used to get to speak at their events. And as soon as I wanted to talk about not using PFAS, I was blackballed. They did not want to hear from me because they thought they needed it for performance. So then there was regulation. And then they all wanted to talk to me again about how to stop. So sometimes, as you say, there are leaders who can do it. Sometimes the whole industry does it. And often you have to wait for regulation. And regulation it does give a level playing field, but it's tough. Because like when California changed the furniture standard, the chemical industry sued the state of California on behalf of fire safety. That's so nice of them. But they lost. Yeah.
So I just want to point out that I worked for 24 years in clinic that tends to the general. And I know that as far as the hospital is concerned, that the clocks, the maternity and home finds are used because it was one of the few things that used to. So I'd be really careful when you're looking at what these things kill, whether it's really effective or what's there.
Well, we're talking about home use.
Right.
We're not touching hospitals.
Okay. Is
But
that
for home use, you don't need them.
yeah? But for hospitals, it's maybe.
Hospitals are different, absolutely. So I think we should probably wrap up. We have your last question there.
Yeah, I just want to say, back in the 70s, when chemical engineering news was on paper, chemists' wives saw it, right? And I remember an editorial in Chemical Engineering News at the end of the 70s that was by, I forget which chief executive of a chemical company in the US saying, please regulate us so that we can comply and have a level playing field with our competitors, right? So he was, but that enlightened viewpoint may not be everywhere in the industry. But also the federal government right now is not in great shape to do anything, obviously. But California, as you're saying, carries its weight, right? So California regulation, people want to sell in California, obviously. So there still is work that can be done with regulation, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think we should wrap, and I want to thank Alex for all your work, inviting people for this great meal. And if it's all happened. Thanks. Thanks for his work for doing the registration and getting Alex on track.
Yeah,
in other events where people had to drag me up to the podium, whatever it was I was supposed to be doing. But it's great to see everyone here. Thanks so much for coming out. Thanks, of course, for our speakers for continuing to inspire us, especially today. There are cookies. There are go boxes because there are leftovers. So take something for dinner. And what else did I want to say? Take a couple copies of Celebrating Chemistry. Get ready to celebrate National Chemistry Week. And of course, grab the URL for the Western Regional Meeting, and we hope to see you there. And I'll just add one more story. You know, people are asking, so what kind of reactions does Arlene get? And we were presenting at a panel in the American Chemical Society National Meeting in San Francisco in 2010. And a former president of the ACS got up and harangued Arlene. And we later found out he was being paid by the flame retardant industry, but this is the kind of thing that happens, okay? So anyway, thanks for coming.
Really nice to see you.
Nice to meet you.
Stop this meeting here.
This was a really great.
Thank you.